I want to first thank our panelists, a distinguished group of panelists tonight. On my far left is Dr. John M. Rudley, who's the president of Texas Southern University. In the middle is Dr. George McLendon, who is the Howard R. Hughes Provost and Professor of Chemistry at Rice University. And immediate to my left is Dr. Jerald W. Strickland, who is the Chief Global Officer and Associate Vice President for International Studies at the University of Houston. So I want to welcome you, gentlemen, to Asia Society. And let me ask first, I know all of your institutions have extensive activities in China and with Chinese faculty and students at your campus. I want to ask each of you, what is it the Chinese want from your institution, and what is it that you want from the Chinese? And let me start with Dr. McLendon.
Thank you, and thank you for putting this gathering together and giving Rice an opportunity to participate. It's actually pretty simple. What we want with our Chinese partners and what they want from us are pretty much the same thing. That knowledge, as far as I can tell, certainly in my scientific field, has no borders, and ability of those people who can best develop that intellectual work have no borders. So we're interested in doing the most good by having the best people worldwide participate in our programs and collaborate with the best people worldwide. So it turns out that, for example, at the undergraduate level, about 8% of our students come from mainland China. At the graduate level, it's more than double that who come from mainland China. Personal note, one of my closest collaborators with whom I've established now a second company is the Dean of Life Sciences and the Dean of the New Medical School at Tsinghua University. And so I know firsthand that some of the smartest people in the world that I'm privileged to work with turn out to live and work in China. So they're interested in taking advantage of the extraordinary intellectual capabilities and facilities at Rice University, and we're interested in taking advantage of the extraordinary intellectual opportunities and increasingly the ultra-modern facilities at places like Tsinghua, Beida, Zhejiang. So I think that's the reason we do this.
President Rudley.
Thank you. We have a special opportunity at Texas Southern where we have what is called the Confucius Institute. And we went to Beijing last year and established a partnership with Beijing Jingtao University. And what's going to happen is faculty will come from Beijing Jingtao University and teach Mandarin on our campus. At the same time, Congressman Al Green kind of gave us the initiative to be able to reach out to China. And so through his initiative, we were able to perhaps get the last Confucius Institute that's going to be granted in a while. For us, China is, of course, one of the most important trading partners, perhaps, with the United States. And with the opening of the Panama Canal, I think the trade between the two countries will probably even become larger. For us, the opportunity is for our students to be able to compete in the global workforce. And certainly, if we have students who are educated in the language, students who will learn the culture of China, students who will learn the business practices of China, and students in general who will learn exactly what is the laws that are in effect in China, will give our students a competitive advantage when they go out into the workforce and be able to say they also can speak Mandarin and understand the language as well as the people and the culture. So for us, I would add to what has been said, but from the standpoint of Texas Southern, gives all of our students a leg up to be able to negotiate in a global economy.
Dr. Strickland?
Thank you very much, President Rudley. The University of Houston has about 1,000 non-immigrant students from China. About 3/4 of those are graduate students. And that's been true for the last 5 or 6 years. As far as I can go back in the statistical history, about 18 years ago, we had about 400 students each year on the campus at the University of Houston. And if you look at what they were here for and what they were looking for, it's primarily business, engineering, natural sciences, and mathematics, those areas. The University of Houston has developed a focus in energy and health, humanities, and fine arts. Those three disciplines across many colleges attracts students from all over. We have altogether about 4,500 non-immigrant international students from 123 countries. The Chinese students come to us, I think, looking at those three areas, three disciplines. The focus on business throughout the United States by the Chinese students has been substantial, and that's also true at the University of Houston. The influence of our faculty, Chinese American faculty, and Asian American faculty is very substantial in attracting Chinese students too, and that's remarkable. The kinds of research that's done by our Chinese American faculty, such as in superconductivity, has attracted a whole host of teams of scientists that have come to the United States to study. Our interest in sending students there and sending faculty and delegations there is the same as the provost had mentioned. We are interested in diversifying both the intellectual activities of our faculty and students, also the cultural activities of our faculty and students. So that's why we're there. It is partly humanitarian because we have health programs in China, but frankly, the advancement of the programs in China, and particularly in their hospitals and clinics, has just gone to high levels in the last few years. So our interest right now is more on the energy side and to some extent on the health side.
To put it in context, is China, the initiatives you have with China, are they significantly greater than with other emerging countries like India, like Brazil? Is China in a special place as far as the scale of what you're trying to do, Dr. McLendon?
Yes and no. We are a small university, and so we have to pick the places that we believe will have the greatest impact for us and the places where we can have the greatest positive impact there. So in our international programs, we wouldn't have the bandwidth, honestly, to try and build programs with 128 countries. Our two largest partners, as it turns out, are Brazil and China, by far. And in both countries, we work for those to be programs that are not so much broad as deep. For example, in both, we just approved the first joint PhD program in the history of rice with Campinas in Brazil, and we're about to do precisely the same thing with Tsinghua. Now, why would we have a joint PhD program? So, for example, if you're a young Chinese student, being at a globally recognized top 20 U.S. university is a really big deal for those students. It contributes a lot to their ability to be recognized in their home country. At the same time, and you can get in vociferous fights about whether Tsinghua or Beida are number one or number two. If you ask anybody from Beida, Tsinghua is number two, and vice versa. But we're establishing joint programs with both Beida and Tsinghua. So if you're a young person and you want to pursue an advanced PhD in science, you don't have to choose whether you want the prestigious Tsinghua degree. It's an interesting question if one thinks about it. Almost all of the top officials in China have engineering degrees from Tsinghua. Essentially none of the top American officials have engineering degrees from anywhere. It's an interesting question how different that would be if all the Chinese leaders were lawyers and all the American leaders were engineers. I have no idea, but it's a fun thought experiment. So the young person can both go to one of the leading U.S. universities and simultaneously get a degree from one of the top Chinese universities. That enables Rice to outcompete Harvard literally. People will turn down Harvard to come get a joint Rice-Tsinghua degree.
Dr. Rudley?
China's on our radar screen. If you look at the institution's initiatives the last 10 or 15 years, because we're a historically black college, we've had great relationships with the continent of Africa. And so many of our students back in the 80s came from African countries. Our second focus of our current initiatives will be in South America. And then China, as I indicated earlier, through the Confucius Institute, that will ratchet up our relationship with Chinese universities, where we'll be able to then take full advantage of the relationship. And where you can see Texas Southern has got a great opportunity to be able to teach Mandarin, offer Mandarin language courses on our campus. Can you imagine in the summer we'll have a bridge program where K through 12 teachers will be able to come to Texas Southern and be taught Mandarin. And so we also like to take 25 K through 12 teachers to China for a 2-week program. So you see we've got the pieces in place to really make the relationship a very rewarding relationship from the standpoint of Texas Southern University. We only have 9,700 students, but we'd like to give them the full advantage of the relationship. And those relationships will extend beyond the university. I believe the Asia Institute has about 100 classrooms where you're teaching Mandarin around the city, I believe. Just connecting the dots will give Texas Southern an opportunity to work with existing Chinese language, they call them Chinese classrooms, I guess. And so by connecting the dots, we fully hope to be a true partner in our relationship with China.
Dr. Strickland?
The University of Houston, the largest number of students come from China. The second largest come from India, largest numbers. The third largest number come from South Korea. And then the fourth largest number come from Nigeria. And then it's Vietnam. And so it primarily Asia. And of the top 10, 8 of the 10 are from Asia. And so our focus, again, we're attracting students who are interested in energy and business and to some extent health-related disciplines. And so that's our primary focus. Brazil is down the list about 12 or 14. The initiatives by the government of Brazil are very promising. They're supporting scholarships for undergraduates and graduate students, and I think that's going to help a lot of many of the other institutions in the Houston area attract Brazilian students. Energy is, of course, important to them, and business is very important to them.
I gather that from what certainly the Rice and U of H representatives are saying, that it is business and science and engineering and health are the things they're interested in as an English major. I'm sort of wondering about the humanities. Are the Chinese interested in having American faculty go over and teach American literature or American history? And does that create perhaps more challenges in a way from a political standpoint? Dr. Strickland?
I don't think politically the higher education gets involved in the politics of China. We stay within the academy. We stay away from that. The conversations are never, at least my conversations are never, on the political front. On the other hand, if it were to come up, we would tread lightly because we understand the society, we understand the culture. As far as what kinds of experience we've had in teaching, yes, we have humanities and fine arts professors who do teach in English, teach in China. The only degree program that we have in China happens to be in business. It's an executive MBA program in global energy management. Again, energy is important to them, and the two major energy companies in the country, government operated, provide the students for that executive program, which has been functioning since 2006.
Dr. Rudley?
I had a special experience this summer when I went to China, and it was at the time when we were signing our agreement that the State Department came out with some kind of letter that indicated that all the folks who were associated with the Confucius Institute had to return back to the United States and be recertified. And so as I was sitting at the desk across from the Confucius Institute executives, they said, well, what about this? And I basically was trying to explain to them that higher education is unique, as Jerry has indicated, and that even though the state, all bureaucracies get in the way in many cases. So whether you're on in the American side of the house or in China, the bureaucracies are something you have to deal with. We both have to deal with them. But I was happy at the end of the day that the State Department pulled that resolution back, and we basically said to them what Jerry said. At higher education, we do things differently. And I think we can work together and work through these issues much better than when you have to go through these the bureaucracies on both sides of the fence. So, Jerry, I agree with Jerry 100%, but I had my one experience what had actually happened to me when I was so happy to be able to sign the document to get the Confucius Institute, and then had to respond to a question. And I might add, it had to be interpreted. In other words, I had to speak English, and they were speaking Mandarin, and this is what they said, and I said, really, is that what you just read? And so we were able to get through it, but that's a perfect example how I think we can overcome some of the bureaucratic issues that plague some of these relationships.
Dr. McLendon, do you have Rice history professors teaching in Chinese institutions?
We have, and what would be of particular interest to you as an English major, probably, is the Chow Center for Asian Studies that Ann and Albert established at Rice. It has the same definition of Asia as the Asia Society. That is, it covers a pretty broad swath. The current director, Tani Barlow, is a cultural studies person. And so she's very interested in literature. She's interested in contemporary Chinese art. She has very deep relationships, and the third joint PhD that we're likely to offer is likely to be in art history. So nothing to do with science at all, and probably with Fudan. We're a comprehensive university. So,
Dr. Rudley?
Well, I didn't state the obvious because I think my colleagues have already said that, but in addition to law, which is we have the Thurgood Marshall Law School, we sent 35 students to China for the Executive Master of Public Administration, and we're seeing a lot of interest from our public administration students in understanding the Chinese culture. And then, of course, the pharmacy students and the business students and the science and technology students are already aboard, and Jerry has outlined exactly what that relationship is. So we'll have those full complements. We have about 20 Chinese American faculty members who teach at Texas Southern across all departments, and we have about at least 20 students right now who are from China teaching, or who actually taking classes at Texas Southern. So we're a smaller institution, but that's a part of it. We have an objective to increase the impact that we'll have by attracting more students to Texas Southern.
Dr. Strickland?
Yeah, I would like to add that we have an Asian American Studies program that's about 18 years old at the University of Houston. Its mission is to teach professionals, teachers, business people, engineers, folks about the people, these folks coming from China, and spending several weeks to several months at the center, in which they're learning skills. They're also having some language training, a host of things. So we're teaching Chinese at the University of Houston for short periods of time. Over the years, I'm told that we have trained about 1,800 of these through the Asian American Studies program. That, I think, these folks are middle management. They're going back. Many of them are government officials going back with an experience from Houston within the university, and having an opportunity in many cases to visit the other two universities here on stage. So I'd like to say we have some experience, and we've had no bad experiences related to government interference or any directives from the government.
I'm interested in American faculty members' experience teaching in Chinese institutions and in the experience of Chinese students living in Houston. So let's switch to that. But just starting first with the experience of Chinese or American teachers, your teachers teaching in Chinese institutions. What do they say about the students? How are the students different or similar to students in this country? Dr. McLendon?
Now, I could probably hand this off to the First Lady of Rice and get a much better answer. But I will try. Let me just focus on. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just focus on Connie Barlow's experience, because she's taught in China more than once, and her experience is a time-dependent one. That when she first did this many years ago, her sense, as she's expressed it to me, was that the Chinese students were extraordinarily bright and relatively deferential. I can tell you from the Chinese students I have in my own class now, that's no longer true. They're still extraordinarily bright. They're much less deferential, which is a wonderful thing. Because the greatest joy that any of us can get as a professor is when a student says, you know, I don't think that's right, and then proceeds to prove to me why it's not right. So what she said is that's changed over time, and I don't know whether that's consistent with Ping's experience, but that's certainly what Tani reports. In terms of the Chinese students' experience in the U.S., do we have any Chinese students who are living in the U.S. in the audience? So I would ask one of them, and they're going to be able to give you a much better answer than I could.
Dr. Rudley, yeah, how are Chinese students acclimating in Houston as far as you can tell? Do they get out in the city, and do they feel at home in Houston, or do they sort of stick to their studies and each other?
I think all of the above, probably. But I'll respond to this way, because like I said before, I'm not really in touch with most of our Chinese students. Only 20 of them, I think they're in science and technology and pharmacy. And from what I see, those students are excellent students. But I just want to turn it around a little bit and say that last year we sent students to China. We sent a little African-American girl from Houston, Texas, who had never been on an airplane trip in her life. And the first trip she had was to Beijing. And she was given some instruction in Mandarin language, but I must tell you, it changed her life. You can imagine the opportunity that young lady had. It changed her life, and when she came back and talked about the experiences, you could see in her the opening up of new horizons. So, you know, we talk about the brightest students, but at Texas Southern, we try to cater to the students who sometimes they need a little bit more motivation. They need a little bit more role models. They need a little bit more pushing and shoving. And I think there's more of them who are in the middle than there are at the top. But you can see from that example the opportunity that it creates for our students at Texas Southern. As far as the Chinese students, when they come over here, you can't imagine coming into a historically black college with the music history that we have, the art history. I told Jerry that we got Joe Sample, one of the best jazz musicians of all time, teaching a master class. So you can see the ability to interact with our culture. It's going to be as much of a life-changing experience for Chinese students as it was for the young lady, little African-American girl who went to China. And that's the image I want you to remember about the relationship that we have.
Dr. Strickland?
Yeah, we have a very large Chinese community at the University of Houston. Imagine 1,000 or so students. And the students that come in, a couple hundred a year, have a home already. The Chinese is spoken, frankly, on the campus too. They have a home there. They also, when they leave it to the community, they have a Asian American community that's welcoming to them, and it's not a problem that has been expressed to any of our counselors. That I should say, there are a few exceptions. Some folks just can't do it, and they do go home. On the other hand, I can recall on the weekends, the parking lots at the University of Houston are generally free of cars. And so the new Chinese students will be learning to drive from older Chinese students who know how to drive. And so the parking lots are full of cars that are moving, some stopping quickly, all around. And so they're being embraced by the Chinese students. Once they learn how to drive, and 4 or 5 buy a car, then Houston is not a problem. And then they get into the region, and it's amazing how many have been to come back and tell me about Colorado, come back and tell me about the further western states. And so it's not only the impact of our changing or giving them instructions on, they're learning from each other. And that's exactly how a nice community and a broad and friendly community operates.
Is it fair to say that most of the Chinese students studying here in Houston intend to go back to China when they graduate, or some percentage hoping to stay in the United States and work? Dr. Rudley, do you have any sense of that?
About a couple of years ago, there was a celebration, and all the students got together, and they were trying to educate me on what the celebration was, and they had it over at the museum, and I went over, and I got the general impression that about half of them are going to go back, but the other half really enjoy being in the country. I don't think you can just, say for sure what they're going to do, but I must say that this experience over here for that group, again, I think it is a life-changing experience for them. But, I'm sure Jerry and students at Rice can talk a little bit more about whether or not they're going to stay or go. But that's what we got students from 22 countries on our campus, and they all get into different mindsets about staying in the country or leaving, and we try to stay out of that decision. And so that's kind of where we are at Texas Southern.
Dr. McLendon.
I'm sure that as many students as you ask, you'll get the full range of opinions. One thing that has certainly changed is that that's not viewed as a irrevocable decision. So my friend Xi Gong was one of the most successful young scientists at Princeton. He was recruited, I hired him at Princeton. He was recruited back to China and given an extraordinary opportunity there that exceeded even what he could have had at Princeton. And so it's at a time that the U.S. is questioning its investments in education. China is not. And so it was a good choice for him to return to China. And I think what you may see is people moving in both directions more than once. So they may spend time in the U.S., then spend time in China, then return to the U.S. enriched by that experience, or vice versa.
Dr. Strickland?
To see the increase in the Chinese students over the last just 4 years, there's been a double-digit increase in the United States, students coming to the United States to study. Again, 75 to 80% of those graduate students. At the University of Houston, we had a 25% increase 4 years ago, 20% the following year, 24% the following year, and this past year was 21% increase. Just in the Chinese students. That is substantial. Frankly, the opportunities in China are substantial with a North American credential. They are just phenomenal. The opportunities to go back into higher education, the opportunities to go back in business, go back into industry, into science is phenomenal. Frankly, to be selfish, we want to keep more here. We have to make arrangements. We have to attract them. We have to provide opportunities for postgraduate training for the best and brightest. We do need them. And so to say that they should, I've heard it said that they should all go back to the country in which they came. That should never be our attitude.
Fritz, I had one other follow-up. When I was in Macau University, you're talking about investments in higher education. When I was there, it's about 13,000 students there at Macau. They're building an entire university right across the little river there, $1 billion. And the example for me was, while we're in America kind of, Jerry and I are fighting for new buildings, the funding and the decision-making to build a companion university is unheard of, unprecedented. And those are the kind of things that I saw that was happening in China. And I think if you look at that example, for the person who was running that campus was a Texas A&M, former Texas A&M faculty member. And so you can see that the cooperation between higher education in China and the United States is continuing, but I was just struck by the commitment of the Chinese government to build a companion university right across the river and go ahead and make the commitment for $1 billion.
Well, we are going to have to stop on time, but I think we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. My colleague Paul Pass has got a microphone. If you've got a question, just raise your hand. Alan Livingston.
In the past, I know there have been visa problems getting students in, and you mentioned there is a big increase. Are those disappearing now, or do we still have visa problems getting foreign students in from China? And also, I'm curious about the number of applicants you have and those that ultimately do attend the university. What percentage based on the response that you get from actually showing up, and what you think about the future trend in that area?
5 years ago, there were visa problems, and that lasted a short period of time. And shortly after 2001, there were visa problems. We're not experiencing that nowadays. The number of applications per that we receive is about 3 times the number that we accept, and part of that is related to the kinds of disciplines that they're interested in and the kinds of places that we have opportunities for.
So I would just echo that, except that the numbers are more daunting. At the undergraduate level, the number of Chinese students who apply for the few slots that we have available is over 15 for every slot. At the graduate level, it's double that. It's 30 for every slot. And so our matriculation rate is 100%. If they are admitted, they show up. So we don't lose anybody in that situation. I'm trying to think. We did lose one girl to institution in Cambridge last year, but that was pretty much it.
We're late at the game, but if any Chinese students are listening now, since they have a student at Rice and U of H they need, come to Texas Southern University. We have plenty of room for you, especially since they worked out the visa problem. So thank you, gentlemen.
Ping Sun.
Hi. Well, Mr. Chairman just asked me to say a few words about the Chinese students, and also George, thank you. Chinese students are actually adapting very well. They are very active on campus, and we have a Chinese student writing an op-ed piece commenting on the U.S. election. We have a student from Taiwan running for Mr. Rice and won the competition. And every year we host a reception for international students. At that reception, a Chinese girl, a freshman from China, was trying to tell David how to run Rice. So they're doing really well.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're going to have to stop now because we have to get our webcast set up. But please join me in thanking our panelists, John Rudley, George McLendon, and Jerald Strickland.